take note of what I'm about to do. My week, our week. Sunday, a dead bird had to be removed from the bars outside one of my windows by a professional. Later that day, a non-professional group had to give life to my dead battery. I stupidly had left the lights on in my car Saturday night, and it was a rather interesting composite of people who helped in jumping the battery. It was Sabras, Ashkenazi, Sephardim, Olim from Canada, from Tennessee, and Virginia. Monday, I'm at the supermarket in my neighborhood, and I notice what strikes me as a weird scene. I see a world-renowned journalist and political commentator, Carolyn Glick, and I actually approach her, not knowing her, and I actually said, this is really strange, seeing someone who deals with world issues doing something as mundane as buying groceries. And in fact, why are you doing this here when I know you live far away in Efrat? And she was very sweet, and she said, oh, well, my son is seeing an orthodontist right here. And I said, I appreciate your wisdom, and make other people wise. Now, I stopped there, and we both got our 1% milk. I really wanted to ask her, you know, she's being considered for going to the New York consulate. I didn't ask her that. I didn't have that much chutzpah, but she was very down to earth. That night, closed all our windows to keep out the smoke of all the abundant fires for Lag BaOmer. By the way, I heard that you had a splendid concert at the shul. You were staying on the topic of fire, very warm, welcoming to our friend Beth. Today, I drove Batya at 6 a.m. to get the train to Tel Aviv, where she would teach. And rockets began falling in the south, in the Gaza Strip. And then I hear in Tel Aviv and surrounding areas, and I call her around 2 o'clock. She doesn't answer. I'm not nervous until my sister calls me, and I can hear that she might be nervous, and I can hear she's eating, maybe out of nerves, crispy vegetables. She doesn't hear that I'm eating out of nerves because I'm eating ice cream. That doesn't make noise. Anyway, Batya calls me back, and she had been calming children down while they were waiting for their parents to pick them up. She decides that she's still going to stay in the Tel Aviv area, where she's supposed to attend a performance by third-year students at her school at 6:30. She's apparently not afraid, not anxious to get back to Yerushalayim Ir HaKodesh. At 4:30, she tells me the performance has been canceled and she's coming back, but not coming back home. She will attend a rehearsal for the next production she's in, which she was going to skip to be able to be in Tel Aviv. She is back in Jerusalem and she's at the rehearsal, and I then ate dinner. Listening to the news, a ceasefire was achieved. And 5 minutes ago, rockets again and again, heavy. Not just in Sderot and in Ashkelon, but in the center of the country. So why did I begin with the dead bird and the dead battery, as if just a list of routine? Now, it's easy for me to list them off as routine because here I am in Jerusalem. And I don't say that glibly because I don't know. I'm not in Sderot and I'm not in Ashkelon. I'm not even in Tel Aviv. That's it. That's what I have to say about this week. Anyway. Okay. I'd like to continue last week's discussion. I'm sorry. I forgot the one really, really good thing that happened this week. Yesterday morning, a former student who lives in Jerusalem now, do you know this, Ruti? Who's about 35, Daniela Adler, called me at 5:30 a.m. yesterday telling me that she's engaged. So, Mazal Tov, great. So I'd like to continue last week's discussion of steps toward social justice. Within the pages of Pirkei Avot, one will certainly find philosophical, spiritual, and psychological discussion. But foremost, Chazal, our sages, make a strong case for the essential role little things in life play. Or at least they appear to be little. Let's begin with this question. Do you always, when you're walking along and you see somebody who you don't know, or you see somebody that you do know, do you always say hello? And if you don't say hello first, why don't you? Especially if it's somebody that you know. Now, this would be a time that you would raise your hand. Claudette.
I do, because the culture I came from, we had to. As children, you could not have passed an adult, whether you know them or not, without saying hello or the time of the day. So when I came to Canada and I was doing, most colored people that see each other on the road say hello. But then my friends would say, why are you saying hello to that person? I said, but that is how I was brought up. I cannot pass this lady unless I say hello. So it's a cultural thing, I think.
Okay. Anyone else? There isn't a right or wrong until we read the Mishnah. Anybody else?
I quite often greet people when I go, either with a nod of my head or say hello, especially when I'm walking with my dog, because there's a certain kind of camaraderie with other people. And, sometimes people are afraid and other times not, but, you try and ease everybody as I walk along.
Okay. So what do you mean by ease, Bev?
Well, again, sometimes when people see somebody with a dog, they become fearful.
Okay. All right.
And then if you smile, then they're more likely to not be afraid because I guess they figure you've got control of the animal or whatever.
Okay. Good. Nachama. You have to unmute yourself.
No, I did.
Okay.
I just want to say that my sister and I also, and my brother, of course, we also came from a culture that necessitated us saying hello to people. That it didn't matter, and this was the main thing. It did not matter to my mother if one of us was waiting for her somewhere, because if she saw someone she knew and she felt it was the right thing to do, she would speak to that person for an hour, for as long as she felt it was necessary to show her interest and give the respect. Why are you making that face? I'm right. So that was a culture that we grew up in. And today, unfortunately, when you're rushed and have 1,000 things to do and you see someone at a distance, it may be easier to just avoid them unless because you'll be pulled into a long conversation, as opposed to going up, grabbing their arm, say, I'd love to chat, but I can't now. So I just wanted to share that.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody else? Okay, so let's look at our first text. Okay. From chapter 1 of Pirkei Avot, Mishnah 15. Shammai would say, make your Torah study. We read this Mishnah in another context last week. What I have bolded, you will see, is what I want to concentrate on. Make your Torah study a permanent fixture of your life. Say little and do much, and receive every man with a pleasant countenance. Hevei mekabel et kol ha'adam b'sever panim yafot. Now, anybody seeing the difference between the English and the Hebrew? It says receive every man or every person, but in the Hebrew it says Hevei mekabel et kol ha'adam. What's the difference between every man and kol ha'adam? Ruth?
Kol Adam means could be a woman, a man, a child, whoever you are passing, and every man could be a man.
Okay, all right. Another explanation is that receive everyone equally, whoever it is, whatever class, whatever religion, whoever it is, or when you say kol ha'adam, the entire person, meaning one of the interpretations is that maybe it's somebody that you don't love even, but look at that person. And even if there's one thing or two things that you don't particularly like about that person, there's got to be hopefully enough else that would give you enough reason to, yes, say hello. Now, when I say one never knows, what I mean there is, why is it important to say hello to somebody else? And when Nechama said, you might take an hour to speak to somebody, even if you don't spend that hour with somebody, but you just go up to somebody and say hello for a moment, why is that sometimes more important than you would ever know to somebody. Why? Why might that make a difference in somebody's life? Claudette?
Yeah. Sometimes that individual that you say hello to may have had a low morning, and your smile or your hello will raise that person's spirit so that they will react to others, and it will continue for the rest of the morning.
Yeah. You don't know where that person's at.
Right.
And just a hello, whether it's a stranger or whether it's somebody who you're surprised would say hello to you, somebody who's you think superior, more important, it could change
Make
the
that
whole-
person's day. Yeah.
Yeah. Anybody else? Okay, I see Marlene. You got to unmute yourself. Marlene,
Yeah,
I lost you.
I'm here.
Okay, speak.
Okay, it's saying hello or smiling at a person is a very inclusive action. And somebody who feels as if they are a stranger, and we see this all the time in synagogue. It's something we are constantly reminding ourselves that when people come into the synagogue, you want to make them feel as if they are part of the kahal. And the way you can do that is by saying hello and introducing yourself and getting to know just their name and welcoming them. And I find very often when I'm walking in my apartment building, I know very few people by name. But when I see somebody, when I'm going to the elevator, I mean, a couple of words like hi and oh, I see you're going to do your laundry is like, breaks the ice. And I think it's in today's day and age, when we're all so wound up in our own thing, and we talk about loneliness being such a big factor in life today, even that little hello and the smile is very important.
Yeah. And that's why the same idea is mentioned again in chapter 4, when it says, Rabbi Matya, the son of Harash, would say, be first to greet every person. Havei makdim b'shlom kol adam. Yafeh. Okay, now let's go on. Rabbi Shmuley Yanklowitz, a young upcoming rabbi, very concerned with ethics, is surprised by the conversation that Jacob, and Pharaoh have when Yosef introduces them. Jacob, we would consider the theologian, the one who studied all the time in the tent, and Pharaoh, the political leader. So one would expect that they would discuss, Yanklowitz says, something profound, or they would discuss the Ra'av, the famine. But what do they discuss? So Joseph brought his father, Jacob, and stood him before Pharaoh, and Jacob greeted Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said to Jacob, how many are the days of the years of your life? In other words, how old are you? And Jacob said to Pharaoh, the days of the years of my sojournings are 130 years. The days of the years of my life have been few and miserable, and they have not reached the days of the years of the lives of my forefathers in the days of their sojournings. So Jacob blessed Pharaoh and left Pharaoh's presence. Yanklowitz says, this is a conversation that's more typical of children at recess in the yard. Why would they have such a conversation? It seems like a very insignificant question. What are they really doing there? Yaakov and Paro. What are they really doing there? It's not the content of the conversation, Yanklowitz says. It's the fact that they are connecting. And he refers to a Rabbi Yaakov Mecklenburg of the 19th century. And he says the following. First, we use language for two functions. We use language to communicate messages, specific ideas, teachings, prayers, poems. Second, we use language to connect to another person. Just as we said hello, to make that connection to the other person, whether it's a stranger, whether it's somebody at work, whether it's a friend, a colleague. And the substance of the conversation isn't always what's essential. It's just making that connection. Sometimes the goal is the message, and sometimes it's just the connection. Maybe you're familiar with the late economic historian, John Kenneth Galbraith. In this context, he talks about the president in the Great Depression, President Hoover, and says, while he was wise and he knew how to deal with the economy, his popularity took a plunge because he did not know how to be personal with the citizens of his country. He was cold and dry, as opposed to his successor, Franklin D. Roosevelt. Anybody remember what made Roosevelt so popular? Anybody? The opposite of Hoover, who didn't know how to be warm? I just gave you a clue, by the way, using the word warm.
He
What-
had his fireside chats.
Wonderful, Beth. Yes.
He
Okay.
he had a new deal.
He had a new deal, but in this case, it was the way he related to people. He knew how to speak to people. He was known to be able to converse very personally. He was known to remember people's names. And he gave people nicknames. And he made people feel so comfortable that he got them during the Depression to even invest again in the banks. And that was all due not even to the content of what he said, but how he related to them. Very, very interesting. So this message of how to speak to somebody, or not even how, but to speak, but really converse with somebody, know that somebody's in front of you, might seem, how could that be so important to creating justice in the world? It does. Yes, Claudette. You're on mute.
Moses was our great leader, but his brother Aaron was the communicator. It says that Aaron knew how to deal and be kind to the people.
And ultimately, it's concluded that we needed both types of leaders.
Yes, we do. We need both. Yes. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Bracha?
Yes.
Sorry, I don't have an electronic hand. It occurred to me when I looked at that interchange between Yaakov and Paro,
Yes.
that I don't know how old Paro was, but I got almost a sense of if Yaakov was afraid that Paro was perhaps envious that he'd lived so long, he wanted to sort of offset it by saying, look, I may have reached this age, but don't be envious of me because they haven't all been very happy years.
No, but that, even you bringing that up, it's interesting, almost as if the two of them share Yosef. You know, I'm his father and you're the one who's taken him in, and if they have a bond.
Well, that, and also he might have perceived Paro as perhaps admiring or envying Hebrews for their being outstanding in some way, and then looked upon the years that Yaakov has lived as something special to the Hebrews, and trying to perhaps offset what he might see as a detrimental or envious approach to the Hebrews for that reason, and saying, you know what, don't be so jealous of me. And but it's an interesting fact that you bring up in terms of their sharing Yosef.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. You sound like you're over your jet lag. It was wonderful seeing you here.
It was
Just,
great seeing you too, and I'm not over. I'm not over
Okay.
the jet. I'm not over the jet lag. Noam stayed a week with me when I got back. I'm still jet lagged.
Okay. All right. Let's move on, staying just for a few more minutes with this idea of words. Pirkei Avot talks a lot about words, but I just want to spend time on one more Mishnah. If you were warning someone to be careful with her or his words, who would it likely be? And I don't mean a particular person. I mean a category of people. Who do you think it would be? I purposely have this big space because I don't want you to see who it's being directed to. Would it be you're warning? I'll give you an example so you know what I mean. Would you be warning, teenagers, watch how you speak to your elders? No, I'm not looking for teenagers. What other groups might you be warning? Watch how you speak.
Thinking you have to, teachers have to be careful how they speak to their students. And I'm thinking of people who are sarcastic. People who have a tendency to be sarcastic have to be careful how they speak.
Okay. Why?
Because sometimes people don't understand the meaning and may take offense at something that is not meant to be offensive.
Okay. Anyone else?
I would say politicians.
Okay, Stan, why?
They're dealing with the electorate, and they could say something that could be perceived against their own party, for example. They have to be careful. They have to take more of a nuanced approach with their electorate. so that they don't discourage people from, for example, on a simple basis, paying their taxes or just being good citizens. They have to be uplifting.
Okay. Good.
Actually, I thought just the opposite. I thought people speaking to government in our political environment today, I think what is going on worldwide makes the average citizen very frightened to speak to power.
Okay, interesting. Two different ways of looking at that same thing. Claudette.
About this Torah scholar, the one who teach Torah, has to be careful with speech.
Why?
Because
you're echoing Bev. She said teacher, but why do you say Torah scholar?
because it can make the name of Hashem desecrated, that if the speech is not correct.
Okay, anyone else? All right, so let's take a look. In fact, chapter 1, Mishnah Yud Aleph. Avtalion would say scholars, chachamim. Be careful with your words. Now, see how strongly this is said. For you may be exiled to a place inhabited by evil elements who will distort your words to suit their negative purposes. The disciples who come after you will then drink of these evil waters and be destroyed, and the name of heaven will be desecrated. So, first of all, Claudette suggested very concisely that Chachamim, if they say something wrongly, it will be a Chilul Hashem, a desecration of God. But a punishment of being exiled? Now, this can be taken, the exile and drinking the waters, very metaphorically. So what in fact is it saying? That students, if they misinterpret something that you say, you have to realize the great responsibility that you have. If you say something and your students eat it up, every word that you say, and they misunderstand you, who knows what they might do? And if you talk about something that is not from the Torah, because you're of the world, you don't just study Torah, but you also teach them classics, Shakespeare or Socrates, and they go and they study that also, maybe they're going to start being attracted to things in exile, and they'll start to forget Torah. And who knows what will happen to them? And things might start to deteriorate. So you have to be very, very careful that they understand how far they can go. And I'm sure we could all think of instances where there are teachers who have such a charisma that students don't listen carefully enough, or they make more out of the teacher than they should and start losing their thinking abilities. Marlene.
I think, you know, we see in our history the effect that a demagogue can have on the people who hear that person speaking. I mean, certainly we saw that with Hitler and the Third Reich, and the way that the people were riled and began to follow him blindly, and those around him. And unfortunately, I think we're seeing this very close to home in the United States. with their politics. And, they really, these people who are there are really in the role of a teacher in a certain way, but they are perverting the words of democracy and a nation, and the perversion becomes pervasive.
No, it's a teacher, a leader, a politician, a journalist has to realize the responsibility. I have here in front of me, just a few days ago, an article written by a Canadian who's been living in Israel moved here 5 years ago. I don't know where in Canada she was from, Zina Rachmalova, but she's writing something against the CBC and accusing them of not writing properly or responsibly, things that she would expect from the Tehran Times, but I just happen to have it on the table now, but also that newspapers have the responsibility, and social media, obviously, of knowing how to report and how you impact, obviously. Yeah, so words, and these are elements that we deal with on a day-to-day basis, not things like, please God, murder and theft. We're talking last week and this week about issues that you and I in our daily lives can deal with. Claudette?
Yeah. Our history is filled with individuals such as Bar Kokhba, Shabtai Tzvi, used words that became very detrimental to our society. So,
Yeah. The beauty of the Talmud is sometimes there are stories there of our leaders that you also learn of things not to say or not to do. On the other hand, there's a story, beautiful, well, I don't know if you'd say beautiful, an image of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai in the Talmud when he's on his deathbed and he's crying and his students don't understand because they believe he doesn't have anything to worry about, that they're sure he will be blessed when he dies. And he says, no, I'm not worried what's going to happen to me when I die. I'm just concerned which path my students will take, because it was in the time of when they were fighting and he chose to fight the Romans, and he hopes that his students really understood what he expected and what he wanted. So he was aware of how important it was for a teacher to be to his students. It's a very, very big responsibility, very big. Okay, we are going to look at something else now that has to do with human nature. So okay, just one sec. Okay, you're going to be reading for about 10 minutes, subtitles, and I want you to pay close attention. 2 years ago, this was submitted at a film festival based, unfortunately, on a true story. And it's a true story that has happened in many locations, and it's called bystanding, the fine gold syndrome of people being in situations where they stand and just watch something happen and don't offer a hand. And I want you to have a sense of, does it seem reasonable? Because what you'll be hearing are people sharing what was going on in their hearts and their minds.
אחד הדברים שלימדו אותי כשהתחלתי לחתור, זה החשיבות של קצב יציב, של לנוע קדימה על פני המים באופן עקבי.
I don't see the subtitles, Bracha.
What?
I don't see the subtitles.
You don't?
Do other people see the subtitles?
מאי, 2009.
I see them.
I do not see the subtitles.
Did you click the full screen also?
Yes.
Okay. I don't
Wait.
know if it may have opened a new, just check if there's a different window that's opened up.
Just a second.
Okay, now I see it. Yeah.
And now I see it.
Should I keep it on small?
Let's try that, I suppose.
Yeah.
ביום שני בשעת אחר הצהריים קרה לי הבלתי צפוי.
Disappeared.
They're not talking.
Okay, this was in May 2009. Yasmin Feingold, who was the champion in rowing, suddenly she was unconscious and her canoe or her kayak capsized.
מתי זה בדיוק קרה?
לפני 2 דקות בערך?
וראיתם בוודאות אנשים בסירה?
כן, ראיתי.
This is now a
באימונים לא
medic.
משנה מה, תמיד הייתי הראשון. המפקד רק היה אומר צאו, ואני כבר הייתי בתוך המים הקפואים. ככה זה היה, כל בוקר. רצים, שוחים, נוגעים במצוף, חוזרים ושוב. אחרי 2 של אימונים אתה מתוכנת לזה. אני צולל פנימה, מעריך את המצב, רואה בחורה מחוסרת הכרה. אני מנשים אותה מתחת למים, ועם כל הכוח שנשאר לי משחרר אותה ומושך אותה ביחד איתי. אני מרים לה את הראש מעל המים, ותוך כדי אני שומע סירנות מרחוק. האנשים עוזרים לי להעביר אותה אל הגדה, שם אני מבצע החייאה כמו שתרגלתי מאות פעמים. אבל האמת היא, לא ביצעתי החייאה, וגם לא הנשמה מפה לפה. נשארו קפואות, נטועות באדמה, מסרבות לזוז.
45 seconds have passed.
אני בפארק הירקון, יש כאן סירה שהתהפכה וזה נראה שיש שם מישהו בתוך המים. תגידי לי מה, את חושבת שאני מטומטמת? היא אומרת לך שיש מישהו בתוך המים. אני בפארק, כתובת זה הפארק, יש כאן גינת כלבים וגן ילדים. אתם באים לכאן או לא? לא, אל תשימו אותי עכשיו בהמתנה.
The person speaking now is an environmentalist.
לפני שבועיים, צ'רלי העיר אותי ממש מוקדם בבוקר בשביל לצאת לטיול. צ'רלי זה הכלב שלי, לא בעלי. טוב, הגענו לפארק. צ'רלי מתחיל לנבוח בטירוף, אמרתי, מה יש לו? מה נסגר איתו? אז מכה בי ריח מטורף של ביצים רקובות, ואז מתגלה לפניי תמונה מגעילה ומזעזעת של אלפי דגים צפים על המים. פשוט כמעט הכיתי. חזרתי הביתה, שומעת בחדשות שיש מפעל בדרום השרון שמזרים את הפסולת שלו לתוך הנהר, כאילו שזה של אימא שלהם. וזה לא האסון הראשון שקורה בנהר הזה. מישהו זוכר את האוסטרלים שמתו מזה שהם שתו מים רעילים? כתבתי אלפי מכתבים, אף אחד לא ענה לי. כל מה שמעניין אותם זה הכיסאות שלהם והג'ובים שלהם, ואנשים בינתיים מתים.
בטוח יש שם מישהו?
כן, את רואה את המשוטים המחוברים שם?
כמה זמן זה כבר ככה?
כמה דקות.
שמע ישראל, אדוני אלוהינו, אדוני אחד, ברוך שם כבוד מלכותו לעולם ועד. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך, ועוד דברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום עד לבבך, ושננתם לבניך ודיברת בם. כשאני מתלבט לגבי משהו, אני מנסה לפעול לפי איך שהתורה מנחה אותי. ואיך שראיתי מה שקורה במים, הקול הפנימי שלי אמר, אתה חייב לקפוץ. אחרי הכל כתוב בתורה, לא תעמוד על דם רעך. ואני רוצה לעמוד במבחן, אבל ההצלה רחוקה ממני. על בשרי למדתי שהחיים יכולים להיגמר ברגע. הבן שלי, בדיוק מלאו לו 6. וכשאני הייתי בגילו, אני איבדתי את אבא שלי. אני לא יכול להסתכן שזאת תהיה החוויה שלו. אז מה עושים במקרה כזה? לתורה אין תשובות. אבא שלי הספיק ללמד אותי דבר אחד, שבסוף הכל בידי שמיים. אלוהים, חזק את ידי האנשים שעל הגדה. תן להם אומץ להצלה. שמע ישראל, אדוני אלוהינו, אדוני אחד, ברוך שם כבוד מלכותו לעולם ועד. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך, ועוד דברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבבך, ושננתם לבניך ודיברת בם.
כבר מסתכלים, אף אחד לא עושה שום דבר. ככה זה במדינה הזאת, כל אחד דואג לעצמי. סולידריות עלק. שומע אותו? תעזרו לה, אדוני, כל כך רוצה לעזור, קפוץ למים, תציל אותה. חלק הוראות.
Now a mother.
אני לא אחת כזאת שמורחת בתירוצים. סליחה, מה את רוצה לחתור במים המטונפים האלה? זכותך, כן, אבל אם משהו קורה, אל תשמחי עליי שאני אקפוץ להציל אותך. יש פה מלא אנשים, שהם ייכנסו. אני לא אכנס בגלל שאני לא אחת כזאת שתיקח סיכון על החיים שלה, לא. אם מישהו אחר רוצה לסכן את החיים שלו, אז סבבה, הצלחה עם זה. אני יודעת שאני נשמעת כמו כלבה חסרת רגשות, אבל זה הכי לא אני. אני הכי אחת כזאת שבוכה בפרסומות. רק לפני כמה זמן אני ראיתי איזה דוקומנטרי בטלוויזיה על איזה בחורה, לפני איזה 50 שנה בניו יורק שנרצחה. במשך שעתיים היא צרחה, התחננה לעזרה, אף שכן לא יצא לעזור לה. אחד. זה לא מה שקרה כאן. כאילו, עם כל הכבוד, יש לי משפחה, יש לי בעל, יש לי ילדים, הם צריכים אותי. חיה, נושמת, תפקדת. אני לא מתכוונת שעשו לי מצפון על זה. על מה כולם מסתכלים?
על הקייק ההפוך.
אני אומר לך, יש שם מישהו, אולי צריך ללכת? צריך לקפוץ פנימה אולי?
אולי צריך לקרוא לאמבולנס. מישהו קרא לאמבולנס?
אם אני רואה התקהלות, אז אני מתרחק. כמה שפחות תקשורת מאנשים עדיף. לקפוץ למים, פה מול כולם, לא תודה. עם מחשבים הרבה יותר טוב לי. אם למישהו הייתה בעיה עם המחשב שלו תמיד, אני הייתי ראשון להתנדב. בלי עלות, בכיף. נבחרת בכיתה ד' בחוג שחייה, המדריך החליט שעושים מרוץ שליחים. ואני נעמדתי בסוף, כי ידעתי שאף קבוצה לא תרצה לבחור בי. זה לא עזר. כשהגיע תורי, התחלתי לשחות, וכשהוצאתי את הראש מעל המים, יכולתי לשמוע את כולם צוחקים. המדריך אמר, הנה, תלמדו, ככה לא עושים. ואני צללתי עמוק לתוך המים, כדי שלא יראו שאני בוכה. עצוב לי על משתווה, אבל אני בעצם עושה טובה שאני מתרחק. יש כאן אנשים הרבה יותר טובים ממני שיכולים לעזור.
Three minutes have passed.
למה אף אחד לא עושה כלום?
זה המים של הירקון, את יודעת, זה מזורם לגמרי.
וואי, איזה מסכן אותי בתוכו. למה אף אחד לא עושה כלום?
הייתי באמצע יום צילום של חתונה בפארק, כשפתאום אני שומע צעקות, יש מישהו במים. אבל אז אני קולט שאף אחד לא מתכוון לקפוץ פנימה. באינסטינקט שלי, אני מתחיל לצלם. להיות צלם חתונות לא היה חלום חיי. כשגדלתי היו לי את כל החוברות האלה של ה-National Geographic ו-Time Life, ואמרתי לכולם שאני אהיה צלם שמתעד שבטים בג'ונגל, או את נפילת חומת ברלין. והנה אני פה, כשמשהו קורה. אני מצלם את זה, כדי להראות לאנשים שמישהו יכול לתבוע, ופשוט כולם עומדים מהצד בלי לעשות כלום. נכון, אם הייתי נכנס למים, אולי הייתי עוזר לבן אדם אחד. אבל ככה, אני יכול להגיע למאות אלפי אנשים. אולי מיליונים.
Four minutes passed.
אפס לאוויר. תוציא אותו! וואו, וואו. וואו, וואו. אמבולנס!
So is Avi Tobin, 62-year-old, who finally went in. She spent much time in Beit Levenstein, a rehab hospital. They did not think for the first few days that she would make it, but she has. But we bring that in as, what was that all about? We had different characters giving different reasons for not going in. It's polluted. I have a 6-year-old. What do you make of this? The photographer saying it's more important for me to be able to photograph this and show it to thousands of people. Anyone comment about this?
The photographer has no excuse at all. There are dozens of other people with cell phones to take pictures.
Stephen, you weren't clear.
I said the photographer is a coward. It's a poor excuse because there are dozens of other people on the shore, all with cell phones. He is just excusing himself for no reason other than he's a coward.
Okay. Claudette?
And it shows you that it's a me society today. It's sick in America and now in Israel. that everybody is out for me, not for the kahil, not for their fellow man.
Okay, Stephen, Brenda?
I think it's very easy for us to say that what was just said, that people wouldn't jump in, but I don't know that anybody knows how they would react in the situation. One would hope one would react appropriately, but you never know what goes through your mind in the middle of an emergency. And some people rise to the occasion and some people don't. And it's not necessarily a societal judgment, although it could be.
Yeah, no, I found the more I think about it, it's awkward after a few minutes that somebody suddenly says, call an ambulance, that the ambulance wasn't called immediately. Somebody had called the police, but in 4 minutes that she's under the water, something could already happen. And it was a miracle that she came back to herself. But it took the 62-year-old to go in. But you're right. Nobody knows what anybody would do. And certainly, that we know that if certainly anybody doesn't know how to swim, then they're not meant to go in. Bev.
Again, there's so many people who forget the value of life at a time like this. And usually I would think that somebody would have gone in or would have tried to get a rope or again, there were enough people there that they could have even made a chain if people had gotten together and worked their way in. But, I'm just fearful that, and again, it's happened time and again that, there are so many bystanders that panic.
Yeah.
And forget the principles of how important it is to save a life.
Yeah. Daniel?
Yeah, I think that the presence of the crowd sort of made everyone say, well, there's so many people here, someone else will do it, not me. Like, why should I take responsibility? There's someone here better than me. But then everyone was thinking that, and then no one did anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
Bracha?
Yes.
I felt this started decades ago when, first of all, we became very conscious of the litigious society in the States, and you'd hear in New York how people would stand around, wouldn't want to get involved. And I think it started to become more culturally accepted for this, which is terrible. But people got used to this. This is what was happening. And I really felt it started with the lawsuits, people being afraid to get involved, and people not wanting to take that responsibility. Perhaps it started that way, but because, you could get sued for anything. And in Israel, I think where people have their lives on the line all the time, they may look at, the value of their life differently because it's a very difficult society. There's a danger there that people live with all the time, and maybe that contributes to the me society.
To be honest, I was shocked when I watched this because it seems contrary to everything that I feel that I would expect here. And how people would react to something here.
Actually, I had an incident where I had the opposite. We were seeing so much of people not wanting to get involved when people were in accidents, that when my children were young and it associated, my son-in-law was the principal there was an incident of a child in the schoolyard, and my doctor happened to be there, and she stepped in and took care of the situation. And I remember my reaction. Thank God, she's a person who didn't worry about getting sued, because this is what you were hearing all the time. People, that's what was going on in society at the time. And I was thrilled that she had that moral fortitude and took the responsibility, solved the situation. And I was so aware of the fact that other doctors were not doing that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Anyone else?
Yes. The first thing I thought about was the George Floyd situation.
Yes, Sarah.
That comes to mind right away when I see something like this. That I'll never ever forget that till the day I die. That video, and I hope I never, see something like that again. That those people just stood around and did nothing. They could have all gone in there and tried to help him. I know the police, I think, were telling people to stay back and not to interrupt and not to help and not to do this. But if there had to be at least 20, 30, 40 people watching that situation, they all could have gone in and done something to help this poor soul, not die the way he died.
I see it completely 100% different. You don't interfere with the police in a society where you trust the police and you don't interfere with them. And this situation is absolutely not comparable. This is an innocent person capsized in a canoe or a kayak where nobody took action. The person wasn't resisting arrest. When the people, onlookers, don't know the situation, whether the police are valid in what they're doing, not valid. You don't make a prejudgment on the police. You shouldn't. But here, the people were just abrogating any responsibility for an innocent, absolutely innocent incident that nobody reacted to. Nobody. They're all cowards.
Well, I don't know, but I think Brenda was suggesting that we can't judge. I don't know.
I trust the police, and sometimes they're bad. Absolutely, I agree. But I'm not going to interfere with what the police are doing.
Okay, well, that can lead us into our last text, and the issue of sometimes you can't punish, and you can't even give a fine or put people in jail for an act or a non-act, even though you think they might deserve it. But maybe that's the most difficult thing. And such is the case with the people of Sdom. And that's background to our last Mishnah of today. When we say, and I think we're all familiar with this Mishnah, but if we continue to talk about human nature, and there are four types of people. One who says, what is mine, and what is yours is yours. This is the average character. Most of us are like that. What's so bad about that? Let's have borders. But is that a good way to be? What's mine is mine and what's yours is yours? There's nothing wrong with it. It's not illegal for sure. What's the minus in that?
Someone needs help. If someone needs help, yes,
right.
I say.
Yeah,
someone needs, you have to be there. You can't say this is.
Okay, so anybody standing in that park by the Yarkon, if that was their attitude of, and one of the women actually said it, you decided to go into that water, then you deal with it. I don't have to make life tough on me by going in there to save you. Well, that's a bit extreme. Okay, now what's interesting here is then it goes on to say, but some say that this quality is what characterizes Sodom. Now, Sodom, you should be aware, is not associated with idolatry. It's not associated with murder, not with theft, not with sexual impropriety, and not even with corrupt business practices. What it is associated with is isolationism. Now, you won't always hear that. Some people might say that they weren't generous. They didn't like having visitors. They weren't kind. They didn't give. They didn't like having people, strangers around. And if somebody came, they would give them a fine. But what do I mean by being an isolationist? They had greenery, they had lots of water, their land was rich in minerals and nutrients, and so they decided they didn't want to trade with anyone. They said, we don't need anyone. And people have said that's what Sodom's problem was. Once you say, I don't need any more or anyone, you're going to be on a decline, because God did not create us to be totally self-sufficient. And that's not how he created countries. We're looking, everyone and every country has its specialties, and you've got to come together somehow. And so that's what it means by you're like Sodom here. One who says what is mine is yours and what is yours is mine is an uncultured person. Amaretz. That's not going to work either. We have a right to have our own ownership. You can't say that we're just going to equally share. And one who says what is mine is yours and what is yours, come on, that's not realistic either. I'm going to give everything up. One who says yours is mine and mine is wicked. Okay, so where do we fall in here? Is there a quality that we've left out? Is there a characterization we've left out? Where do most people fall here? Anyone?
Sometimes you share and sometimes you don't. You know, there's a time for everything.
Yeah, and we said last week that there are times that we're allowed to not share.
Bracha?
Yes.
There was something I found interesting in that episode where the person was in the water. It was kind of a shock that one person didn't call the police, one person didn't go into the water. Till that ice was broken, though, what really surprised me is that when finally somebody acted, and speaking of sharing, I expected other people to go into the water with him. I thought once that ice was broken, once somebody got over the shock, you would think other people there would have gone in to help him.
Well, that's what I said. I also, the more I saw it, totally, but they felt, no,
well, the first part, you know, was so shocking that nobody did something. But on the second part, once that ice was broken, you would think at that point, people would wake up and then join in helping.
Well, I think if you look up Feingold syndrome, there's a discussion about it. Because it's been discussed. This happened in 2009. I think there might even be a TED talk about it.
Bracha.
It's not limited to this country. Stan.
it was shocking to see that video, really. I think it indicates, as you said, why did just one person go in and no one followed? We're becoming inured.
And that was somebody who just came along and right away went in.
Yes. I think our society in general, whether it's Israel or Toronto or Canada, we're becoming, there's a crust being built around people. We don't trust, we're not trusting. At one time, people in the city here in Toronto, they never locked their doors. Now you've got 3 different locks. I mean, you're told in an apartment building, don't open your door to anyone. Well, what if there's a guy outside that needs help and he's pounding on your door? You don't open even an inch. We were told that because there's been break-ins. So I think generally society is becoming distrustful of everybody. And it takes a real hero like that fellow to go and say, listen, I'm a human being and that person's in distress. On a lighter vein, to show you this distress, recently, somebody in our family went shopping to a reputable mall here in Toronto, parked outside. She comes back to her car, gets in the car, and there's a tap on her window. She lowers the window. Miss, I want to tell you that you've got a nail in your tire. You should really take a look. She went and got out of her car. While she was out of her car, somebody came around to the other side, took her purse, her cell phone, all her credit cards out of her purse. And of course, then she was in trouble because sooner, within a half hour, there were $8,000 taken out of Visa, $10,000 out of this. Anyway, this is what's going on. So you'd like to figure, well, this is a good Samaritan, right? It's going to tell me that I got a flat tire because of a nail. Anyways, I think it's unfortunate that we are becoming distrustful, and when we see somebody in distress, we figure, well, who knows whether this is legitimate? Should I go over there and help that person? And
but we're justified.
We're justified, right?
We rationalize because we're scared.
Yeah.
So can we ask the question, why could I leave my car on Carlton Street 50 years ago with the roof down and the doors unlocked all day, and I can't today? What is the issue and why has that happened?
So why has it changed? That's a good question.
Yeah.
What's happened to society, you're saying?
What I'm saying is that this society today is not that society then. So where is the difference in society? It's different cultures mixing. We as Jews have a great difficulty mixing Sephardim and Ashkenazim, reconstructionists with Chabad, no, I should not say Chabad. Chabad is about the only welcoming group in our people that welcomes